What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video, and we are back. We are at the third and final part of this mini-series. We were taking a look at my piece Call to Adventure, breaking it all down. So in part one, we took a look at the music theory and the actual core skeleton of what makes up the piece. Then in part two, we took a look at the arrangement and the orchestration, how we took the instruments and evoked the certain emotions and the atmospheres I was trying to go for. And then here in part three, we're taking a look at the actual processing, mixing and mastering behind the piece to actually bring it up to that professional standard. So before we really dive into the plugins and things like that, in case you are wondering about how to write a piece of music in this sort of Nintendo Disney style, I would love to give you my free 5 steps to a thematic piece of music guide. It basically has the 5 core components you need to know in order to write music that sounds whimsical and magical and adventurous. And it's helped a lot of my students. I would love to give it to you as well. And this really breaks down the core components that Disney and Nintendo composers use on a regular basis to write their music. And it's really, really interesting. So yeah, I want to give it to you completely free. If you want to click the first link in the box below, it'll take you straight over to where you can download it and keep it on hand whenever you're writing a piece of music in this style. So anyway, let's quickly talk about the processing of this track. So in case you're unaware, the way I like to personally mix my music is through what's called top-down mixing, where I actually process my stereo out first, like my stereo bus, and then make my way down. If I have any group tracks, then I'll apply processing to those, and then make my way down finally to the individual tracks. So it's super, super simple. But before that, I always do a pre-mix EQ phase as well. So before I do my static balances or anything, I'll go through the tracks, I'll apply an EQ to basically each track, and then I'll basically notch out the frequencies that are undesirable, and and then maybe boost up the ones that I want to hear a little bit more of. Just some very general EQ curves. But for a lot of orchestral samples in general, because they're recorded in scoring stages and halls which have quite a bit of low end rumble, you might find yourself doing some more high cuts. So for a lot of my instruments, I do sort of a high pass filter around 120-ish, and then I boost up a little bit of the high end because it sounds a little bit more light, and also brings out the air in the samples a little bit more, right? So each sample is a little bit different. Each track is a little bit different. But if you take the time to actually go through this, cut out the low end frequencies that are kind of bothering you, and then boost up some of the ones that maybe you want to hear a bit more of, that can already get your mix about 80% of the way there without even having to apply a single plugin. So let me just play the intro here really quickly or the beginning. Yeah, you can see we're really cutting out those low bumpy frequencies. And I wanted to hear a bit more of the high in there. Turn it off. Right, it's slightly darker. Turn it back on. Slightly cleaner, right? Yeah, and the other thing you'll notice is in addition to these EQs, I've also added an ascend for a number of these tracks, which I thought were a little bit too dry. So those are all sending over to a dedicated reverb bus, which contains an instance of East-West Spaces 2, and I just used the San Francisco Hall, the front mic, I guess, 3.4 seconds, keep the wet all the way up, dry all the way down, slight bit of pre-delay, that's just by default, I just left it as it is. And basically, I just turn up or I add a bit of reverb to whichever instruments I feel are a tad dry. So if we have a listen to the violins one on their own, remove the send, you can hear how it's pretty dry. Let's add it back in here. Off, on. Yeah, so you can hear that tail is instantly added to the end of it a little bit, right? So it feels like it's recorded in a slightly larger hall. And I just went through most of the CSS or CS instruments from Cinematic Studio Series. They're all a little bit on the drier side anyway. So I'll find myself applying the reverb there. So I usually turn it up to about, minus 15 or so, something like that. But yeah, let's quickly talk about the actual processing on the stereo bus. So first of all, in terms of the EQ, it's quite light. Like I don't like to do any huge bumps or anything like that, huge notches or huge drops or dips. If anything, I'll do a high pass filter to really get at the sub frequencies so you can see below 20 hertz. I basically removed all that stuff. But then aside from that, the most I'll bump something up is usually 2 to 3 decibels because I'm not going for huge changes here. I'm going for subtle tweaks that will enhance the overall mix a little bit. So yeah, you can see I brought up the low end here. Oh, actually, let's console. There we go. Yeah, I want a bit of that low emphasis, right? A little bit more of the boom because I want the strength in there. Then this mid-range frequency was bothering me a little bit, right? You can hear how it's a little honky in a way, so I didn't really like it that much, so I removed that. And then the high end. Right, so there's that high end that's added in there. Let's actually take off the EQ and hear how it sounds. Yeah, suddenly to me it's a lot honkier. It feels like it's a little bit muddier as well. Just not as clean. I think it's this mid-range here that's being added back in. It's not very desirable to me. It's part of the Hollywood Winds thing. So let's hear it one more time. I'm gonna add the EQ back in. Yeah, it's like night and day actually. Even hearing on these Apple earpods, not AirPods, yeah, earpods, which I use to mix anyway. Listening back now, it's so clear to me. It's a huge difference. So anyway, a little bit of there, and we also hear more of that high sheen as well with the, with the high end being boosted up with that high shelf. Then after that, I do a bit of compression. Now, compression, I always refer to the loudest section of my piece. So that, in this case, it would be the C section. And I'm looking for the needle to basically do a little bit of gain reduction, usually between 1 to 2 decibels of that. Yeah, here you can see it's like moving just a little bit, right? And I just want to contain those highest peaks just a little bit. I'm not trying to squash the mix. Orchestral music usually isn't like that unless it's like a trailer piece. But in this case, I wanted to keep it relatively natural, so I left the ratio about 1.6 to 1 instead of anything higher like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, which would really squash it down. And then, yeah, I just adjusted the threshold until the needle was only moving just a little bit. Turned off the auto gain and did my own makeup gain about 0.5 decibels, which was about the same as what was being compressed in the compressor. And that's it. So super simple with a compressor. And then I added a bit of mixcentric. So this just adds some sweetening to the overall mix. It's a 1-knob plugin that I use basically all the time. Let's turn that off first. And I'm going to add it in now. Off. On. Right? So it immediately just brightens up the overall mix. There's a bit more crispiness there. It feels more like up front, maybe more up center, just more excitement. And I really do like it. It's a combination of a lot of effects going on. I just, I use it, try to use it sparingly. I don't want to do too much to it and overcook it, but that's what that is there. And then the very final thing I'll put on is the Ozone 9 plugin, which is Elements. Okay, keeps it super simple. It's just an EQ. There's an imager and a maximizer. So I basically went to the loudest section. Again, this is the chorus. I let the Master Assistant do its thing, and it came up with this curve for me, which is actually very similar, which I'm happy about, to the EQ I applied here. You can see. So it notches out the lows, it bumps up some of the low mids, takes out some of the mids there, and then bumps up the highs. So yeah, let's just have a quick listen. And it also raises the overall volume quite a bit, right? Super quiet, so turn it back on. That's the maximizer. Imager, I'm doing about 20.7 just to keep it a little bit more stereo, just to widen the overall image slightly. And then EQ, you can see, yeah, there's that little curve going on here. This little noise floor is simply because of the mixcentric plugin. If I turn it off, you can see the noise floor disappears. So unfortunately, right now at the moment, there's no way to turn off that noise floor in this plugin. I wish there was, but there isn't. So it's just what it is. But yeah, other than that, that is basically it. My processing chain is super simple. As you can see, this piece in particular, I did very little, right? You can see I processed the stereo bus first. After applying the EQs to the individual tracks, doing the pre-mix EQ, then I applied the processing here on the stereo. Then I went through and applied whatever reverb I needed to really just get it sounding a little bit more cohesive, having all the instruments in the hall, and that's basically it. So EQ and compression and balancing, those are kind of your 3 core elements that you want to focus on when you're doing your mix, and that could get you 90% of the way there. The rest is just little details of sweetening and certain EQ moves if you want to do that, but or distortion or saturation, whatever it may be. But overall, if you do EQ to kind of shape the instruments the way you want them to get them fitting with each other, compression to contain the dynamics, not letting anything kind of poke up or be too quiet or whatever, and then also the overall volume balances, which you should be doing at the very beginning in your static mix, making sure they're all sitting at appropriate levels, and then moving on to automation, which let me quickly show you. I basically went through and pulled down some instruments where they're a little bit too quiet, raised them up when they're a little bit pulled them down when they were too loud and raised them up when they were too quiet. And you can see I kind of did that here. So yeah, nothing overly crazy, but if there were certain melodies I wanted to be heard more, then naturally I'm going to bring them up a little bit, right? But yeah, I'm not doing anything super drastic because in the actual performance itself, like when I'm recording in the MIDI before bouncing to audio, I'm making sure to actually get the right velocities in relatively, use the mod wheel, get the dynamics in there. And that's just like, this is just fine tuning when you're doing volume automation. It's kind of like my last step before I apply the mastering chain or the ozone elements. So there we go. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Again, it's super, super simple. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's the mastering chain, mixing mastering process for Call to Adventure. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Again, if you want to write music in the style of Disney and Nintendo, maybe you're not quite sure how, then again, feel free to download that free guide down in the description box below. 5 core steps to write thematic music that really just evokes that timeless sound. It makes it sound adventurous and fantastical and whimsical. All that stuff is included in the guide. It's super, super practical, and I want to give it to you totally free again as a gift for checking out this video today. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again, and take care. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.